Welcome. I'm Kevin Miller. This is a podcast for your personal evolution. In this episode, changing your identity and getting comfortable in your own skin. I have grown to revere people who have made a significant transformation to their identity. And we like to celebrate people who have made huge accomplishments out in the world. But people who actually transformed who and how they are my heroes at this point. Now, my guest today has admittedly some big worldly accomplishments, but I invited him on to the podcast because of his personal transformation. So Josh Peck, you may well know him. He's an actor, a comedian, a YouTuber, social media star, and he rose to fame in a lead role in the Nickelodeon sitcom Drake and Josh back from 2004 to 2007. Now, more recently, he starred in the Disney Plus series Turner and Hooch, and I actually saw him just a few weeks ago in an episode of HBO's original series, The Last of Us. But his story, he comes from a troubled home. Josh became fat. He was the fat kid. And to offload the teasing, he turned to being funny. Well, from that, he ended up in showbiz. And his run on the Drake and Josh show as a childhood actor was literally with him as the funny fat kid. Well, the show got canceled. He turned to drugs and alcohol. He lost all of his fat weight and just didn't know who the heck he was. Well, he finally wrote about it in a book titled Happy People Are Annoying. You're about to hear about Josh's journey firsthand. You can find Josh anywhere you type in Josh Peck, of course. When we initially talked here, he had about 13.3 million followers on Instagram. And I saw that he now has almost 17 million. So join me as Josh and I talk about his journey of a real transformation of his very identity. Let's evolve ourselves today. All right. You may be the first person. I grew up in the South and in the church, Josh, and I've never heard anyone remotely refer to Jesus' disciples as ride or die homies. So that's the first credit that you get out of me reading the book. That was profound. Thank you for that.
Listen, happy to help. And that's probably the most millennial thing I could have said when doing my light theology in the book.
It was significant theology. And now that came out of you talking about Ben Kingsley and his wisdom for you when you ask, what do you got to tell me? And he says, find your apostles, find those people who are going to stand beside you. But you really hit on, kind of expound on, find those people who will also tell it like it is. Is that fair? Who will really call you to the mat when necessary?
I think that's fair. Yeah. Working with Sir Ben Kingsley, who is my favorite actor and such a hero of mine. At that time, when I was 21 years old, or 20 years old, making a movie called The Whackness, I was looking for some version of a father figure, someone to tell me that everything was going to work out. And selfishly, I was really looking for the secrets to how to be a movie star, or maybe even a tenth of the actor that he is. So when I asked him for advice, and the last night we were together, he said, find your apostles. And I said, Ben, with all due respect, I'm a Jew, and I'm also looking for the secrets to becoming rich and famous. And that just sounds like a New Testament deep track. But as I learned what apostles were, and as it was revealed to me over time, is that it's, to Ben Kingsley's credit, he said, find people who support you, that can be there for you in moments of rejoicing and in moments of pain and strife. And if you find yourself in a room of people who don't support you in that way, leave immediately. And, apostles have a very special ability in which to tell you things, even if it might hurt your feelings, knowing it's what's best for you.
Well, and that's significant because, at first, when you say that statement that he said, you could easily hear that to go, oh, just find people, hang out with people who are going to tell you what you want to hear, make you feel good about yourself. And you're not saying that. You're saying, no, that's not the point, but they are for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's that I always say, if you're wondering who an apostle is in your life, think about the last person who told you something that you didn't want to hear. And if you had these four reactions right away, which was screw them. I'm the worst. They're probably right, but it's too late. Fine, I'll do it. That's what goes through my mind. And if all those four boxes are checked, I go, whatever they just said probably was a value, and that person is a value.
Yeah. So looking at it now, there was something you said, actually, I think it was in the back, like in the conclusion part of your book, and your therapist was really encouraging you to a point and saying, no, give yourself credit for what you have done, what you've gone through, and how you pulled yourself up by the bootstraps, kind of, I'm paraphrasing, but there's a balance there between you taking, you did a lot. And we're going to talk about some of those things, the things that you did, you had awareness of, whether you knew it or not. And Josh did it. And yet over here, you are giving a lot of credit to the people along the way that, as you said, supported and encouraged you and helped you. And where is that balance fall for you of giving yourself credit and also recognizing the incredible support and fortune, can we say, or privilege that you did have, even amongst what I think people would not look at as a privileged life, at least early on?
Absolutely. And yet, I was born into a first world country with a certain level of, even though we constantly vacillated, my mom and I, between middle class and low, basically having no money, it was like I didn't go to bed hungry, and somehow my baseline needs were taken care of. So to your point, you're right? Like how much of it is fortune? How much of it is, that we all win a certain lottery being born under a certain circumstance to an extent. And yet you're right. I don't know. I don't think I've quite perfected that yet. I would imagine the people that I trust and look up to would say that taking credit for anything or is not really my business. And more so it's about just an acceptance of, the realities, and my life is good. And that if I spend my time neurotically worried about the other shoe dropping or questioning why I'm here, and having debilitating imposter syndrome, it's like all these things inhibit me from being of help to others. And that's the only real thing that I know for sure is God or the universe or fate. The only reason for me to have a good life is to make me more equipped to help other people. Because if I'm really struggling, I don't have as much time to help others.
Yeah. I'm interested in you saying debilitating imposter syndrome. I talk about that frequently because I've just kind of made friends with that. I do have imposter syndrome, and I don't think it'll ever go away. And I think I'm better at just waving to it. And I'll go online like I did today and say, okay, in the last 30 days, 500,000 people have downloaded the show. So I must have something. And so don't be so nervous, but obviously can't be debilitating. But I think we often looked at things like that and go, oh, at some point you're going to get past it, right? That's the overcoming. And I'll ask you how you feel about it, because I've kind of made friends with that. I don't know if it'll ever go away. I don't know why.
You're so right. I think the volume goes up and down depending on your spiritual maintenance, depending on what's going on in the world. I guess the greatest thing you hear about meditation is it's not that you stop feeling things, it's that you become less reactive to it. You become more of an observer of your thoughts and go oh, there's that thought, which is probably a pattern thought of oh gosh, something bad happened in my life. That's a preview of more bad to come. Or I didn't get that deal, and so this financial insecurity is going to spin me out. I think it's about being less reactive to those thoughts instead of wishing them away. Because to your point, I don't think they ever go away totally.
No, it's good though. That I think to me it's a big deal, because I think again we in this personal development self-help arena, the thought is that you're going to grow, change, evolve, and you will not have those problems anymore. And I've struggled to see that the problem or that issue or that lack or that, errant perspective of being an imposter when you obviously must not be, according to the results, but that it's not there, but it doesn't have so much power over me. And that was a lot. Heck, that's a lot of your story, Josh, or that's what I got out of the story, is seeing things, the one you shared, it was the first series that you got onto, that the guy, that you wanted to be on the show, and he got you on there and sent you up there. And like the first 6 episodes, you said you were on the bench, literally. So you're there, you're being paid, but they're not putting you in out of their own, issues. And you said something to the effect of, instead of being just pissed about being on the bench, I'm going to sit here and use it as a learning tool. Now, you wrote that in the book. Was that thought? Did that happen then? So you took that negative thing, you didn't let it have power over you, decided. But what, at that time, did you really think that? Or are you saying now in retrospect, that's what I did, thank God?
I think, to your point, talking about the taking credit of it all, going back to that, like I sometimes it can be to my detriment, that I just feel like I always feel at a disadvantage. I always feel the need to prove my worth. I always feel like when I get into when I start a new job, when I get into a new environment, and now at 35, having done the amount of work I've done as an actor, like working, but also doing the real work, which is going to acting class and like learning the craft, I know I'm meant to be there. It's just a matter of, but then you're talking about like milliseconds, right? Like you tend not to lose the Olympic finals by 20 seconds, but the elite person is beating you by a second, and that second is everything. And so when I get to set now, or when I'm walking into these environments, I'm like, no, I'm supposed to be here, but am I going to be tuned enough to beat out that other person by that second? Is my work going to be in a place where I've really, prepared and set myself up to win at the highest level? I think that's sort of like the gradient of it. So yeah, I think I just always, I was just working on something, and I had to be reminded, because I have such an easy forgetter in my mind. Mm-hmm. And the ego has incredible recuperative powers, but I just felt like a total imposter for the first couple of days. And then halfway through, I start getting like more comfortable. I'm like, oh yeah, that was just necessary. And I didn't necessarily respond. It didn't feel great, but I didn't act out. I didn't overdo it. I didn't like really lean in and get into that people pleasing energy to combat that feeling. I just felt it and said, and then halfway through, when all of a sudden things are clicking, I'm like, oh, right. Like, no matter how much you respond, there is a bit of that, like, you got to get in the water. You got to get on the court. You got to like get a little bit of the ring rust away and be reminded, like, okay, I know how to do this. I have a muscle memory, but it's hard. It doesn't always show up.
And it speaks to me, I guess. Yeah. And you're making me think about it again, of not in a spiritual sense, but just of faith. So I feel like an imposter. I feel like you said, as a disadvantage, but you've done this enough to have faith and have awareness that I am okay. I do belong here. And kind of in that sense, do you look at that feeling that you tend to come to things with a feeling of disadvantage, that in how it motivates you, it is an advantage?
Certainly. And I don't know too many people that aren't, it's amazing when you see these people who are really elite at things, how at home they are in doing the basics and doing things you would think that they should be past by now. And it's just like the gritty, not sexy, part of the process that you don't want to watch in a movie montage. Like, we all want to watch Rocky run up the stairs and beat up the hanging meat and, do and drink the raw eggs. But if you really watch, a boxer, it's monotonous, because I love boxing. And it's like, it's 3 hours of training every day for their whole life while they're fighting. And then it's a month off after a fight and they're getting back in shape. And it would not make a good movie montage, but that's what they're doing. And I think all the people that I look up to, it's very rare where I'll be like, oh, they're a savant. They have a magic about them that you can't learn, but they also work the hardest. They're working harder than anyone else in the room in most cases.
Well, it's interesting, in your profession, do you find, I think we as spectators could look at the celebrities and think so often that they are all that, and they know they're all that, and they think they're all that. Do you find in the reality of your profession, more people, some that do have an ego and think they're really all that? Or do you find, no, most of them actually do feel a little imposterish, feel like they're at a disadvantage, and that's what helps them step up and be who they are?
Yeah, I think that I think imposter syndrome is like something that should be taught and accepted, and it is plagues high achieving individuals. It's like it's just a part of it. It's pretty common. And I would say I think people in my position, if I'm being brutally honest, vacillate between huge swings of gigantic egoism and entitlement and utter swings of feeling like, deep, deep fear that they aren't enough and that things aren't going to work out. Many of us are egomaniacs with inferiority complex.
That's a great line. Egomaniac. Because as soon as you said that, I thought, now I do have those times once in a while when, man, the bank account is fat and, the downloads are there and the testimonies are good and I feel good. And I'm just going to kind of revel in that. That's the rarity. Most of the times it is the imposter and the disadvantage, but I do appreciate the swings, I guess, once in a while. I haven't had anyone say it as you just did. Yeah.
I get it. And do you ever, and how long do you find that lasts when you have all the data you need, right? Like bank account looks good, downloads look good. How long can you revel in that?
Oh man, probably a day if I'm lucky.
Sure, exactly.
Yeah. Something's gonna derail it. And yeah, you have me thinking about, you could say, yeah, it keeps me humble. It probably just makes me work hard and not get too comfortable, which is probably good. Because we all know the person who does have the ego, they do think they're the stuff, and none of us like that person.
And maybe, I don't mean to project, but if you're like me, it's like when work is going perfectly, there's something going on with my son or my wife. Like not everything can be, firing on all cylinders at all times. So if my professional work's going great, then there's something in my personal life that's giving me, some challenge, and vice versa.
No, that's true. And I would think almost, with seasons, if you're investing a lot in one area of your life and you get that area of success, you've often neglected a little bit some other area of your life that now needs your attention. I find myself doing cycles like that, like dig in and write the book, dig in and produce a lot, dig in and start a new business, whatever. And then I've let something else go. And now it's okay, get back on the exercise regime, get back on the diet. Have you talked to your kids or your wife lately? And that comes with the territory.
Yeah, I think it's probably a part of it.
You're a big premise of the book, Josh, and what initially intrigued me was you start off with this, you mention it, multiple times in the book, that you are an amalgamation of trauma. Obviously, your book, you go through a lot of the trauma, but that statement alone, that you are an amalgamation of trauma, it doesn't mean you are your trauma. That word amalgamation is even interesting. It doesn't mean you are your trauma, that it rules you, but you are some mix of soup of the result of your trauma. And it's either, crap soup or fine bisque, I guess, but it's still a big statement that I don't think that we take into credit in our lives of, yeah, we are the sum of to a degree of what's happened to us and then how we perceive that. And of course you have a lot of stories, and again, I do feel like some of it, you write the book, it's so funny and you kind of go over these things, but I'm looking at it and go, man, that moment, and that's why I said it was gritty. That moment, that sucked. That was horrific. And that could have done a lot of people under for good.
Yeah. I don't know. It'll be revealed to me years later about like how I approached this book, if it was correct. Maybe correct's the wrong word. It was correct because I've had a handful of people reach out to me and have looked into recovery because of reading the book, or just felt seen. And if 5 people feel that from me writing the book, it was worth it. And the massive advance. I'm kidding, but
of course.
But I chose a title like Happy People Are Annoying because, the people who make the books thought that was a good title. And I sort of found the book grew into the title. And I put, the cover of my, very punchable face on the cover because I was like, well, that's how people know me. It's a little bit of this like corny dude that people grew up with. And then and then I go in and my first line is, "You're an amalgamation of trauma," because I knew that I needed to write a book for people like me. And it was something I just thought about, especially in starting to write this book about like genetic inheritance. And it's not an excuse. It's not a blaming thing, but it doesn't hurt to just be aware of like what you were born into, what you had no say in the matter of.
Yeah.
And like, it's easy because for the last 3 or 4 generations, for many of us, we haven't, had to worry about our next meal or freezing to death. But that wasn't that long ago. And so there were plenty of people in your ancestral tree that were living really challenging, unfair lives, like up until maybe at best 3 generations ago, unless you were born into royalty.
Yeah.
And, and I even look at like, I have an older parent. My mom is 77. So my grandmother, was born in like the 20s or in the teens, I guess. And she was a young Jewish girl living on the Lower East Side of New York, like walking around without shoes, like an orphan, and then she had my mom and did as best she could, but obviously was dealing with her own trauma. My mom did even better. And then she had me, and I'm trying to do better for my son. But there's just, we inherit a lot of this transgenerational stuff, and we have no say in the matter. And so I just don't think it's any surprise why there's so much work to be done once, you become aware of sort of what your lot in life is.
Yeah. Well, and it's your awareness or how you dealt with it in the time, which is why you're on here. It's interesting. You talk about questioning somewhat how you wrote the book and whatnot. And I do appreciate, we do judge a book by its cover. So I'm playing that game right now as well. And that's relevant, but it's not the first rags to riches kind of story or memoir, which are in some ways not always my favorite. But it was the insight, and it felt very approachable, your story. And just, again, how you had those insights like that, like just what I talked about, that you were on the bench as how old were you at that point? 12 or something like that at that series?
Yeah. 12, 13. Yeah.
Yeah. Something like that. You're on so here you get this big break and they snub you. And yet you had the thought of mind that I am going to sit here and learn. That right there, that's a gigantic lesson. How often I'll say everybody listening, but me, have I been in a challenge and said, okay, instead of just being pissed, bitter, and trying to just get through it, do I say, no, what can I learn? It sounds really pithy and elementary, but it's very inhuman. It's very counterintuitive to sit in a challenge and go, okay, what can I learn? How can I make a benefit? And you did that at 12, and it paid off too. That's the other thing. It wasn't just a, wise, altruistic kind of thought. It paid off. Here you are. That's a massive lesson.
Yeah. Thank you. I think, to your point, it's the silver lining of, or where our defects can be assets and vice versa. And because I felt at a disadvantage, because I grew up really overweight, and I felt like people made a knee-jerk reaction when you walked into a room, that you were slovenly, that you lacked willpower, that people would like immediately decide that you were of less social value.
Yeah.
And so because I'd been so used to walking in a room and saying, listen, I don't want to be spectacular, but I would prefer to be on the same playing field as everyone else.
Yeah.
That going into that situation on the Amanda show and being around these people who, I'm watching Amanda at this time, and she's like Amanda Bynes, for anyone who doesn't know, who was like, she was like a young Carol Burnett, like brilliantly funny and 6 months older than me. So it wasn't as though I was being relegated to sort of like the backup spot, but watching a team of chumps. Like I was like, oh no, these people certainly deserve to be the starting 5. And if I'll ever deserve to be 2, it would behoove me to study them and maybe even steal a bit from them.
Well, it speaks to me then too of humility, but we look at that. I like the definition of humility is not thinking less of yourself, but just thinking about yourself less. It's not a minimizing of self. But you did that. That took a humility for you to be there and to recognize that they had more experience, if not more chops than you did. You're grateful to be there. And again, to learn, but it puts we're back to ego. again. We're back to not letting the ego drive. And man, Josh, that's one of my bigger regrets in life. I was a pro cyclist who was very uncoachable. I'm really blown away. And I shouldn't even say that. I know that that's part of my nature. And if call it arrogance, call it, I fall on myself, my own self-sufficiency, only trust me kind of thing. And there's a lot to unpack there. But man, I look back and I was so uncoachable. It was such a waste. I was an incredibly mediocre pro cyclist. Great that I made the pro ranks. That's what you get credit for. But I was so mediocre and so chaotic because of my lack of humility. And I went on the other side of, no, act like you do have it all together. And you seem to have balanced that. Well, I was going to say balance it well. You had big ups and big downs in trying to balance that.
Certainly. I love what the Navy SEAL, Jocko Willink, who's super famous now and written a bunch of books. And he always says, like, the guys in BUDS or in Navy SEAL training that were the most sort of, I don't want to say dangerous, but always, would seem to fail were the untrainable ones. And he's like, and many times they were physically gifted. He's like, more so than some of the other guys, but it didn't matter because if they couldn't hear from me where they needed to be better, we were at a stalemate. It would never, ever work. They were, and inevitably they would be the most dangerous in a combat scenario, he said, because they would lose respect for the enemy.
Wow.
And yeah, I thought that was an interesting take on it. So to your point, as a pro cyclist, you guys are peeing on the bike a lot, huh? You're peeing yourself.
It was terrible. It was, it was, I have a bashful bladder, man. So you put it's a bad combo. I'll never forget. I think it was 2002, the US Pro Cycling Championships in Philadelphia. And I had to pee so bad. And we've got like it's a 150-mile race, few laps left. I literally attacked, went off the front. And I'm not, one of the big pros, but I went, thank goodness they let me go. And it was only so I get to the top of the hill, stop, run behind a tree, pee, and then get back in before the pack is gone, because I had such a hard time. If you're good, and I did it sometimes, you can do it while you're riding and not even mess yourself. It's very difficult. And if you have a bashful bladder, it's just a death knell. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm fascinated. I mean, it's unbelievable how hard it is to be a pro athlete, anything, but we hear stories about, some of these, super long battles and the Tour de France. And I mean, it's unbelievable what you guys go through. And you have to be so lean, so light.
Yeah, it was fun. Honestly, it was fun all in all, but it's nuts. The guys in the tour, man, they're nicer than a lot of the races I went to. They would decide as a group, hey, we're all stopping to pee. And that was beautiful. It was one of my favorite moments in the tour because I just felt relief watching it. I wasn't ever in the tour, by the way, but that's it was significant. You talked about the perception of being fat. Big part of your story. You were up to almost 300 pounds at what age? Or again, are we around 12 or something?
14. Yeah.
14. And that's nuts. How tall are you?
6 feet. But I was 14. So I was probably like 5'6",
Man, that's nuts. Okay. So that perspective, slovenly, lacking willpower. I read in the book about you talking about your journey of, so then you lose the weight later on. And now and I look at you today and you and I look about the same. I'm same height as well. And realizing that I don't know if you use this word, but you loathed that guy. You were mad at that guy from, I guess that, how could you let yourself do that? How could you do those things? And it was important to you. And I don't know if you spoke to why. So I'm going to ask you, it was important to you to come to peace with that guy back there, to love that person back there. And it's interesting to me because in this arena of personal growth and whatnot, I see that a lot where people despise and even speak to that. I hate that person I was back then. I love the person I am today. What are your thoughts?
I mean, hate can be a great motivator. I think we probably have seen some of our greatest athletes are the products of admonishing crappy dads.
Yeah.
So I think it can be, but look, so much of what we do, the driving force of I always love this idea of like, I care about your actions, not your intentions. Right.
Yeah.
So if you start the greatest tech company in the world because of a bad date, like Mark Zuckerberg, because you got rejected by, a girl at a date, which is the first thing in the social network, and you never want to feel that way again. Well, I mean, your intentions maybe weren't the cleanest in that moment, but look at the result, So I think for millennia, guys have done cool stuff to get girls to like them. Mm-hmm. And I think there was certainly like me wanting to lose weight was to prove that I was, again, it goes back to genetic inheritance. Like, I came from a family of big people. I did not want to be defined as that. And it was specific to me because there are plenty of people who are bigger or don't fit under like the traditional standards of beauty, who are completely unencumbered by it, live like beautiful, full lives, and are in relationships and are with attractive people if that's who they want to be, and they're like not affected by it. I happen to be very affected by it, and I just desperately wanted to live a life. I don't know. I just always wanted to be average. And because I felt so unique at a young age, I was the kid of a single mom. I didn't know my dad. I was fat. We were, a musical theater family. So I didn't have any of that. We were, financially insecure. So I didn't have any of those anchors that made me feel like, a normal kid. I was always going for average, and average meant being of a normal weight. And I think that's really what drove me in the beginning.
Well, and like you said in the book, some of the, maybe a motivating factor, some of the peers who were okay with their weight, I guess, are now dead. Like, Chris Farley and whatnot, which is, you wrote that. And when I was reading the book, I had just sent a friend. I was at a bike race. I still do some mountain bike races. I was at one a couple of weeks ago, and they have this big setup. And so to secure our spots, a buddy of mine, we parked our trucks and camped for the night. So we'd have our big setup the next night. So I threw a mattress in the back of my van. And so then a guy who was with us, he's asking me what I do. And we're talking about personal development and whatever. And of course I'm thinking, I am Chris Farley. I'm a motivational speaker living in a van down by the river. So I was living it out, which, by the way, here's a gift to you and everybody who's listening. Type in Van Gogh. Everybody knows Van Gogh, VANGOGH, Van Gogh down by the river. And this artist did this representation of Chris Farley doing his Saturday Night Live speech, Van Gogh down by the river. It's beautiful. I need that. I need to get that picture up on my wall as well. It's beautiful.
Oh my God. I'm going to check. That sounds great. I mean,
it is. What's that?
What a genius Farley was, man. Just the best. Yeah,
he was, but comfortable in that, you weren't. And it's interesting that you looked at that and you talked about, this is meaningful to me. Josh, you said fat was a permanent chapter in your story, one that you couldn't rewrite out. Like, that's a big one to me, because again, in this industry that we're in, I think we have, again, that perspective of we're just going to overcome and eradicate our past, our genetics, our upbringing, or whatever. And I'm looking, I can't ever forget that. And I did not have a hard upbringing, but I can't forget those things. Those are grooved in there. I had the idea of a CD. Those of us old enough to remember CDs, you'd burn something in. That's there. You can't get rid of it. But now you can put new stuff on, so that, what you said in essence is that that chapter exists, but now you have an infinite, I'm paraphrasing, infinite ability to write new chapters that, again, don't eradicate that one back there, but would you say redeem?
Yeah, I would. I think so. I think there's a redemptive nature to it. And I think, we can't betray our origin story, because it has everything to do with how we get to where we get. Yeah. And I had to love that kid and realize that it wasn't his fault, like that it wasn't for lack of willpower. I would look at myself in my 20s and going to CrossFit and losing all this weight and such like a regimented person and sober and in shape. And I would think like, who was that kid? But that kid was playing with a 13-year-old, you know, with the best hands that 13-year-old had. You know, he wasn't emotionally equipped yet. He didn't have the tools. It wasn't like it was clear, like, here's the path, and I turned my back on it. I was surviving, and the best way that I knew how. And so it allowed me to have a lot of love for that kid, and to not be mad at him anymore. And he was stronger than I have to be now. Like, I don't have to be the strong in the way he was.
Do you really feel, I find myself curious with this. Do you look back and it really feels like a completely different individual, or do you still resonate some with that person, or does it feel kind of like an alien person?
I'm one of those people who I find, like, myself last year, I don't know that guy. Like, it's constant reinvention. And I'm always me, but I just constantly feel, especially with like my work, it just doesn't allow me, I feel, to get to, I've just never really like been in a groove, if that makes sense. But I just have some very like fundamental truths I know are important. Like, I have to put my sobriety first. Everything has to come next. It's the idea of like, if the oxygen mask on the plane drop down, put yours on first. So that allows me to be of service to my wife, to my kid. And they are, you know, as close, you know, it's funny to say there's close, you know, as close to the number 2 in importance in my life as it gets. And I know that to be true too. You know, like it's also been revealed to me of like, I love acting. It's a fun thing that I've done throughout a lot of my life. And it still like gets my goat. Like it's still this mystery that I'm dying to solve. And it's cool to me knowing that I'll never, the perfect game will never be played, but maybe I can just get really good at it. And yet I know that if anything stands in the way of me being in service to like my wife and kid, like I really like hanging out with them. And so I'm at 35, I am facing the realities of that a little bit of like, did I want this thing as much as I thought I did? Or the version of it I thought I wanted? And would I be okay with just like making enough money to be able to hang out with my wife and my kid a lot?
Yeah. You saying that you don't know or relate to the guy you were a year ago. Here's what's interesting to me on that, Josh, because I feel that way as well. And it was Ben Hardy. So Ben Hardy is an author. I've had him on the show a couple of times, and he's got, I think it's in his new book that's either coming out. I don't know if it's come out yet. It's called Be Your Future Self Now. But he was talking. So he and I were just talking. He says, okay, just like what you said, I mean, do you look at yourself a year ago and think, man, have you changed quite a bit from the guy you were a year ago? How about a guy you were 5 years ago or 10 years ago? So, I mean, I've got your book here. You've changed dramatically. And yet we always feel like wherever we are now, we're kind of who we are right now. I'm Josh, I'm Kevin. And yet realizing that, man, in a year from now, we're going to look back to the person I am right now and think, oh my gosh, I can't believe how blind that guy was, or that he missed that, or he wasn't that one. I don't even know if I've made peace with that perspective there. It just kind of blows me away to think about that the person I am now, I'm going to look really, really soon in the future and realize what I was, but not to make it all negative, but I'm going to feel like, man, I've grown that much. That really puts into perspective today, like to what you're relating to.
It's totally. And I feel like my buddy who's a great actor named Brian Garrity, we talk about different roles that we play. And he would say, you know, some roles are destinations and some roles are ones in which to help you get there. So like when I did Drake and Josh was a destination role, right? Obviously, like it triggered the zeitgeist. So I'll probably, you know, it'll probably be the thing I'm most remembered for. And then I did these other things. And then over the next 10 years, and then I do The Whackness, right? Which was this movie that won Sundance with Ben Kingsley. We talked about it. And that was another destination role. And between that and like the next 5 years were a bunch of roles that I learned a lot from, that helped me pay my bills, that I met some wonderful people on. But, you know, they were helping me to the next thing. And then the next thing was I did this show Grandfathered with John Stamos. And that was like, wow, I got a network TV show. Like I'm back on TV. And John and I came into each other's lives at a very important time. And that was a destination role. And then I spent the next 5 years, working a bit, but really out of work, going through so much emotional challenge, facing a lot of my demons and the realities of who I thought I was. And then only to book this show, Turner and Hooch, that I was on Disney Plus. That was such again, like I was the star and I was an action star, which I never thought I could grow into. So, it's like, I think it helps to be aware of like, and I think you can know, like, am I in a destination role or am I like in, on that journey to get to that next thing?
Well, it's interesting. A minute ago, you said that you don't often, if ever, feel like you have gotten into a groove. And I resonate with that, Josh. And my first thought was maybe it's because certain people aren't really looking for a groove. In big ways. I mean, my family changes, my work changes. I mean, the groove of my athleticism has been there since I was a kid. That's my play. I love it. And that's a groove. So I'm sure we're playing around. There are some things that are grooved into my life. We'll talk in a minute in our next show about, your values and habits and whatnot, but there are some grooves. But as far as who I am, what I'm doing, continual points that are consistent through that, but it seems like it's come to fruition in a different way. Maybe like you're going to be an actor, but you're going to do it in this show. You're going to do it in a movie, in a series, in a short, and you're going to do it playing this type of a character. I did watch The Whackness because to me it stood out as it wasn't even the comedy. Here, I'm holding up the book for those of you watching video or not watching. And I wanted to see you in that frame, and that was a different groove, even though you're still acting, but a very different groove. So maybe that's, I don't know, personality thing, a good thing, a bad thing. I don't know, but it just seems to be, it is for some people like us.
I think it all depends. And I think once you get to a certain place, if you've really attained things, it's easy. I'm still in a position where I'm sort of juking and jiving and figuring out like what the next thing is. And is it something someone wrote and I fit into that part? Is it something that I work on that's an original thing? Is it, is it my podcast? Is it writing this book? It's still a discovery phase. I find like the people, and I'll just use acting as an example, like when you're of that 1%, if you're Leonardo DiCaprio, like not taking anything away from him because he's brilliantly talented, like so unfair, so much so it's unfair. But also, he's working with the best. So that helps keep you in a groove, right? Because you're also being set up to win. If you're Tom Brady and you're doing all the work, it doesn't hurt that your whole life becomes like, sort of revolves around you being at your best. Like, and I love hearing about his sort of habits of like what he drinks, what he eats, when he goes to bed, the body work that he gets done on him. Like, so once you get to a certain level, it's easy to put certain sort of systems in place to keep you there if you can keep your ego at bay and if you're willing to continue to do the hard work.
Yeah. And something else I don't want to pass up here is that you talked about, it was actually one of the latter things that I read was, and again, your story is not just all the early story, but it's just so significant, and the weight loss and the whatnot. And I see again in this industry of personal growth that when you make a significant change, some of the hardest, I don't think we give it enough gravity, some of the hardest pressure, if not the hardest pressure, is just the norm of our own lives and the culture and our friends and our family, and how so often, even as they are well-intentioned, it's difficult for them to see you go through a significant change. And to paraphrase what you talked about in the book, because it kind of shines a light on them, or it puts the mirror in front of them about the change in their own life that they are or are not making, and off not. Now you went through this, and that's why it was interesting to me in such an acute way, because it was on TV in front of a zillion people. So you're playing this character who is fat. And in that as you were playing that character over, what was it, 18 months?
No, the show.
The weight loss.
Oh, sorry. Yes. 18 months about.
So here they are watching you, and every week Josh is a little thinner until ultimately, and you didn't just get some, feel a little pressure. You literally got, I don't know if it's fair to say hate mail, but you got significant pushback. So it's taking this issue that I think we all often deal with when we're trying to make positive change in our life. And it's, times 100 that you got and had to withstand. I just want people to hear that, because I don't think we give it enough gravity, and you dealt with it at a huge standpoint. It was possibly, and you were concerned that it was actually going to possibly tank your career even.
Well, I knew that how do I describe it? I felt like being the weight I was, doing what I was doing, that if that was my only way to be successful, then I was going to just be like a hack, like a prop comic. Like, it's just like, it was like, if when I lost weight, and some people might say that it happened, but like, if when I lost weight, all of a sudden my gravitas or my sparkle, whatever is specific to me that's winning, my ability left with 100 pounds, well then, what am I? The bearded lady? Like, am I just like a freak show, and it's all tied into my physical appearance? Because last time I checked, like, being an actor is about disappearing and being able to be in different roles and take on different skins. So I just, I had to be willing to face that reality, that I was like, I don't think whatever is specific or winning about me is going to leave when I lose weight. In fact, I think I'll be more equipped and I'll have more superpowers, because I won't be so insecure and be so tense. And so, yeah, I mean, look, I love the phrase, maybe you don't like the new me because you're still the same you. And,
wow.
I think people inherently, they hate to be forced to speak a new language. They hate when the status quo is disrupted. A lot of times people will choose the same pain and instead of trading it for the prospect of something new, right? Like,
totally.
They'll just stay in it. They'll be like, yeah, but I know this pain and I'm used to it and I know how to withstand it, and it hurts, but not that bad. And if someone says, well, there's a possibility that you might be able to completely rid yourself of that, they'd be like, I don't want to take a risk. I'm familiar, I'm familiar with this. So it just elicited a lot of feelings in people where they got upset. It wasn't the majority. The majority of people were lovely, but there was certainly a good handful of people that were pissed.
Yeah. How long? So what age were you? So you went from, near 300 at one point, but then you had this significant over 18 months, 100 pounds or whatnot, and got down to, I think you said your goal was 180 pounds.
Yes.
Your goal weight. So what age was that?
That was between 17 and 19.
17 and 19. So let's say 19 years old. You're there. You're where you are today at 35 years old ish.
Yes.
How long? You mentioned something to the aspect of, I think you have skin, and I put in there that idea of being comfortable in your own skin. So you were this very overweight kid, and not to say that you were comfortable in your own skin, but it was the comfort of what you knew, the devil, as you kind of referred to. So you were there, and that's how you saw yourself. That was your image. Now you change it at 19. Today you're 35. How long did it take, if it did happen, I assume it did, that you were then comfortable in your new skin? Saw yourself that way?
It's such a work in progress. It's like, and I don't know if it's just age, like you get a case of the F. It's like, where you're just like, I don't know. Time has a nice way of allowing you to stop caring as much. Recently, I was doing this movie for my friend Brian Greenberg called Junction, and the scene was like this post, love scene, and where we're sort of talking and getting dressed, and I was nervous because I still know that I still have relics. I have some artifacts of my old body on me. I'm not perfect, but I would usually, those typical like tight white tank tops that men wear in movies. I just, I knew I didn't want to be shirtless, and I didn't think I wanted to wear that either because I was like, it's not exactly flattering. It's white, it's tight. And I put it on and I just said, you know what? I don't care. And I actually thought I looked pretty good, but I could certainly see that you could see some skin through it. I saw that, there was certainly like from the wrong angle that I might cringe for a moment, but it didn't it didn't cripple me. And certainly from, up until 30, I mean, I think, look, as this is both can be good and bad. I'm a typical married guy who I'm like, well, the one person who sleeps with me finds me attractive. So what am I worried about?
Yeah.
But, throughout my 20s, surely, when I was dating and doing all that stuff, it was like very much about how can I, make myself the perfect version of me. So I'm a work in progress for sure.
Hey, Josh, it's such I don't know, a pithy interview question, but I care to know so here you are, you're going along, you're living the life of redemption of your story. Mm-hmm. You're a happy, healthy guy today from, a lot of reasons not to be. So there's the redemption. Was there any specific catalyst to say, I want to put it in here? Because I really appreciate the conclusion of your book. And it's like, man, if somebody can get one insight out of this book that helps them, it's a home run. What was it in you that wanted to bring that forth and make that effort?
I want to make sure I understand. So like to make that effort to kind of start my life to write the book?
Well, yeah, to take this forth and try to impact people with it.
In recovery, I learned at 21, I went into my first 12-step meeting at 21 years old, and a guy has said it better than I ever could. He said, you didn't tell me what was wrong with me. You told me what was wrong with you. And I identified with that. You were sharing my story. You drank the way I did. You felt the way I did. You hurt people the way I did. And you weren't a glum lot. Like it wasn't this, I walked into my first AA meeting shattered, and I'm looking at these people who have all the cash and prizes that come with a good life, careers, families, nice cars, but they were whole, happy people, but they suffered from a lot of the same mental stuff that I did. So suddenly it was possible. And there would be moments throughout, the community. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, knowing that you're, a faith guy, like, they've done these studies about like atheists and agnostics, and they say the one thing that's universal, whether you believe in a higher power or not, is the need for community. We're community-based, beings, and religion, in addition to the faith part of it, can also offer you this beautiful community. So I found in, having this community that I was no longer alone in my feelings and my experience, and that I could say something at 3 or 5 or 10 years in sobriety and say, I'm in fear because my wife is pregnant. I'm in fear because I'm financially insecure. I'm worried that, this isn't going to work out, or this or this. And people would be free with their stories. Mm-hmm. They would share their experience and say, I was in a similar place. Here is how I was able to walk through it with some grace. Here's how I got to the other side, and I didn't have to drink over it. So to me, the silver lining of these challenging experiences is the ability in which to be vulnerable and transparent with the next person and say, I know what you're going through, and if I can be of any help, this is what helped me get through that.
That's a great insight. And you referencing my own faith. You know what? There's the teaser and the kickoff for our next, our part 2 coming up here in just a moment. Is that fair?
Yeah. Sounds okay. Great.
All right, man. It's been great. Yeah. I have a couple other things. I'm going to put them in the next part here, but man, I'm so grateful that you did take the effort to put this book together, to be candid. And I am a grateful beneficiary. I'll be talking about it over the dinner table tonight with my kids, and in ensuing shows. We're getting ready to do one on mental health. And man, I thank you for making the effort to bring this book and offer your message. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us in this discussion. That again is Josh Peck. You can find him anywhere, all over social media, huge YouTube following, huge Instagram following, tens of millions of followers, I think. And then his book, Happy People Are Annoying. And that's where I got the story that we talked about today. Thanks for being with me. Till next time, here is to the evolving you.
Yeah.